The year was 2473. In the cold, endless black of space, the human warship Resolute drifted without a sound. Its engines were silent, its lights dim. For weeks it had been hiding, avoiding patrols, staying far from the main trade routes. Captain. Mara Vance sat in the command chair, staring at the empty starfield. The only sound on the bridge was the faint hum of life support systems. Most of her crew was asleep. Fuel was low, supplies were tighter. Then, in the middle of that silence, the sound came. A faint, broken transmission cut through the static. The comms officer, Ensign Keller, sat up quickly. "Captain, I'm picking up a signal," he said, his voice sharp. Mara leaned forward. "Source." Keller's fingers moved over the controls, trying to clean the static. "Uncharted sector. No relay beacons. And Captain, it's human." For a moment, the bridge went still. Human voices didn't come from deep space anymore. Not from out there. Humanity had been crushed outside the Sol system decades ago. The Krill Dominion had seen to that. "Play it," Mara ordered. The speakers hissed. And then a voice, faint but clear enough to freeze her blood, whispered, "Help. Before they find me." Mara felt her stomach twist. She looked at Keller. "Any identification?" He shook his head. "Nothing. The transmission is old style, pre-war encryption. The kind used by Earth colonies, before they fell." The words hung in the air like a ghost. Pre-war encryption meant one thing. Whoever sent that signal had been alive or trapped for decades. "Where's the origin?" Mara asked. Keller hesitated. "Krill Dominion space? Deep inside?" The bridge stayed quiet. The Krill were not just enemies, they were exterminators. They didn't take prisoners. The human was alive in their territory. It didn't make sense. Which meant one thing. "It's a trap," said Lieutenant Harrow from Tactical. "Has to be." Mara's eyes stayed on the black window of space ahead. A trap made sense. A human voice was the one thing that could lure a ship like Resolute out of hiding. The Krill knew how desperate humanity had become, but deep in her chest, something else stirred. What if it's real? She had heard enough battle distress calls. In her life, to know the sound of true fear, that voice had it. "How far?" she asked. 3 jumps, Keller replied. "If we use the main drive, we'll burn half our remaining fuel." Harrow shook his head. "Captain, we can't risk it. One wrong move, and we'll be torn apart before we even reach that sector." Mara didn't answer right away, she thought. About the stories her father used to tell, about the last days of the colonies, about families running, about messages sent into the void, hoping someone, someday, might hear. Her father's own ship had never come back. She stood, light the engines. Harrow turned in his chair. "Captain, I said, light them. Set a course for the source of that signal." Keller looked uncertain. "Even if it's real, Captain, what if we're too late?" Mara's voice was low, but steady. "Then we find out who sent it. No human voice calls for help and gets silence in return. Not while I'm still breathing." The bridge crew exchanged glances, but no one spoke against her again. The order went through. Deep in the ship's belly, the fusion cores roared to life. The Resolute began to move. Hours later, Mara stood alone in her quarters, staring at the playback of the signal. She had looped it a dozen times, trying to catch details. A faint echo in the background, like metallic footsteps. A second sound, a low growl, almost mechanical. She paused the recording on the last frame of static, leaning closer. Something flickered there, a shadowed outline, barely visible. "Not human?" Her door chime rang. Harrow stepped in, holding a datapad. "Long-range scans picked up movement along our route. Krill patrols. At least 2 destroyers." She didn't turn. "Expected. We can still change course. Pretend we never heard that signal. No one would blame you." Mara finally looked at him. Her eyes were cold, but her voice was calm. "You're wrong. I would blame me." Harrow studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Understood." He left, and she was alone again. The playback resumed. "Help. Before they find me," Mara whispered to the empty room. "Hold on, I'm coming." Sighed. The Resolute cut through the dark, leaving a faint blue trail. Ahead lay the heart of enemy territory, and the source of a human voice that should not exist. Into the Dominion, the Resolute cut through the black like a silent arrow. Captain Mara Vance stood on the bridge, her eyes locked on the shifting starfield ahead. The hum of the engines was steady now, but every instinct in her body screamed that this was wrong. Going into Krill territory was like walking into the jaws of a predator. No human ship had entered these sectors in 20 years and returned alive. The Krill Dominion was more than just an enemy. It was a nightmare carved into history. There, fleets had burned human worlds, enslaved survivors, and hunted down every last trace of human expansion beyond Sol. The message she'd received, it didn't make sense. The voice had been human, too human. Mara tapped the console, replaying the faint signal. "Help, before they find me." It was scratchy, broken by static, but the tone was unmistakable. Desperation. Lieutenant Rourke, her second in command, leaned over her shoulder. "It's a trap, Captain. The Krill know how to mimic human speech. We've seen it before." Mara didn't look at him. "It's not like this. Whoever sent this, they're real. I can feel it." Rourke shook his head but didn't argue further. He had served with Mara long enough to know when she had made up her mind. The star charts lit up with a crimson warning as they crossed the invisible line into Dominion-controlled space. Sensors began to pick up faint Krill energy signatures, not close, but near enough to make every crew member tense. Navigator Ellen Kova's voice was tight. "Captain, signal is getting stronger. Origin point is on a class of moon, orbiting a gas giant. No recorded human settlements there." Mara studied the readings. A moon, uninhabited, yet a human signal. "We go in." Rourke frowned. "What if there's a fleet waiting? We could be surrounded in minutes." Mara's lips thinned. "Then we fight our way out. Or we don't. But we don't ignore this." The crew fell silent. In the stillness, the only sound was the steady ping of the scanners. The Krill signatures were faint, but there was no telling how fast they could move. 2 hours later, the Resolute emerged from behind the shadow of a frozen asteroid. Ahead, the gas giant loomed, a swirling storm of crimson and gold clouds, lit by flashes of lightning deep within its atmosphere. One of its many moons rotated lazily, its surface pocked with craters and jagged mountain ranges. Kova pointed. "At the display, signal is coming from the far side, near a canyon system. We'll need to orbit low to keep our approach hidden." Mara nodded. "Do it, and keep the shields at minimum." The Resolute slid into low orbit, its dark hull blending into the moon's shadow. The distress signal was clear now, repeating every 20 seconds. But there was something else, a faint undercurrent of noise, not static, but more like a whisper under the voice. Mara narrowed her eyes. "Rourke, isolate the background sound." He tapped at his console, and moments later, the ship's speakers played it back. The whisper wasn't human. It was a chittering alien clicking sound. Kova's voice was tense. "That's Krill speech. Someone is very close to the source." Mara felt a cold weight settle in her chest. Which means whoever sent that signal, they're either hiding from the Krill or being used as bait. The decision came quickly. "Prepare the shuttle. I'm going down." Rourke spun toward her. "Captain, you can't. I can, and I will. If there's a human down there, I'm not leaving them. You have command until I return." Minutes later, the shuttle broke from the Resolute's belly, dropping toward the moon's surface. The descent was rough. The atmosphere was thin, filled with ice particles that scratched against the shuttle's hull. The jagged canyon came into view, its walls casting long, sharp shadows. The signal was deafening now, echoing inside her helmet. Mara guided the shuttle into a narrow landing zone near the canyon floor. As soon as the engines cut, she stepped into the biting cold. Her breath fogged in the air, and the silence pressed against her ears. The beacon lay just ahead, a small transmitter wedged between rocks, but there was no sign of a human. Mara approached slowly, weapon drawn. The device was old, human-made no doubt. but it was connected to something else. A black, organic-looking pod embedded in the rock. The pod pulsed faintly, as if alive. Her gut twisted. The clicking sound was coming from it. A shadow moved above her. She looked up. On the canyon rim, 3 krill hunters stood, their insectoid forms outlined against the pale light. They had been waiting. Mara raised her rifle, but before she could fire, a voice rang out behind her, human, hoarse, and urgent. "Move," she spun. A figure in a battered environment suit waved from a narrow crack in the canyon wall. Without thinking, she sprinted toward them as plasma fire erupted from above. The rocks exploded around her. She dove into the crack just as the krill leapt down. The stranger slammed a hidden door shut, sealing them inside. The sound of krill claws scraping the outside echoed in the dark. "Who are you?" Mara demanded, catching her breath. "Tss." The figure pulled off their helmet, revealing a gaunt, bearded face, human, without question. "My name's Kale," he said. The Resolute slid through the void like a ghost, its hull painted black to hide against the starfield. The crew moved with quiet precision, every sound muffled, every step careful. They were deep inside Krill Dominion space now. The further they went, the more the air on the ship seemed to thicken with tension. Captain Mara Vance stood at the command table, eyes locked on the shifting red grid of the star map. Every few minutes, the Krill patrol markers would pulse, ships sweeping the sector. She counted them, timed their routes. Every instinct told her to turn back, but the human voice from the distress call still echoed in her head. "Chief Engineer." Hollis entered, a smudge of grease across his cheek. "Engines are steady, running quiet. But the radiation leak in the aft stabilizer is getting worse. If they scan us too closely, they'll smell us." Mara finished for him.
We'll
"Be dead before we can even fire back." "Exactly," Hollis said grimly. "So, maybe we stop chasing ghosts in enemy space?" Mara didn't answer right away. She tapped the cum log, replaying the static-filled message. The voice, a man's, came through weak, but clear enough to feel human. "Before they find me," something in the way he said it, not just fear, but urgency, convinced her this was no random bait. She looked Hollis in the eye. "You saw what they did to Arcadia Station. If there's even one human out here alive, we don't leave them to die." Hollis shook his head, muttering under his breath as he left. "You're going to get us." "All killed, Captain." Hours later, the bridge lights dimmed as they approached the source of the signal. A massive gas giant filled the view, its swirling clouds lit by a dying sun. Hidden in the planet's shadow was a cluster of jagged rocks. An asteroid belt large enough to hide a fleet. Lieutenant Wren, their sensor officer, leaned forward. "Signals coming from inside those rocks. Power signatures faint. Could be a derelict ship." Mara's eyes narrowed. Or it could be a krill ambush. She ordered the ship to slip into the belt. The Resolute moved slowly, weaving between tumbling boulders the size of cities. The crew's eyes darted to the windows, scanning for movement. The krill were masters of camouflage. Their ships could mimic the texture of asteroids until they were close enough to strike. Wren's voice cut through the silence. "Captain, I've got it." The signal's clearer now. The speakers crackled. This time the voice was stronger, almost desperate. "They're here. I know I sent the call. Hurry." The hairs on Mara's neck stood up. "Trace the exact location," she ordered. Wren's hands flew over the console. "Got it." A small vessel wedged inside a hollow asteroid. Human design, at least 2 centuries old. No transponder, no active weapons. "Life signs." "One," Wren replied. "Faint." Before Mara could speak, the ship's proximity alarms blared. On the tactical display, red blips lit up like drops of blood. Wren shouted, 3 interceptors inbound, closing fast." Mara's heart pounded. How the hell did they find us? "No idea." Hollis's voice came over. "Comes, but if we fight here, those rocks will tear us apart." Mara didn't hesitate. Helm full burn toward the signal's coordinates. "Prepare docking team. We're grabbing that survivor and getting out." The Resolute roared to life, engines flaring blue as it darted through the asteroid belt. Krill. Interceptors twisted in pursuit, their sleek, insect-like hulls glinting in the faint light. They reached the hollow asteroid with seconds to spare. The survivor's ship was wedged inside like a broken bird in a nest, its hull scarred and pitted. Docking clamps extended, locking the two ships together. The airlock hissed open, and a team of armored crew members stormed through. Mara led them personally, rifle in hand. The inside of the derelict smelled of rust and stale air. Lights flickered weakly, casting shadows across walls covered in strange symbols. In the cockpit, slumped against the controls, was a man in a torn flight suit. He looked up as they entered, his face pale, eyes wide. "You shouldn't have come," he rasped. "They're not just after me. They're after all of you." Before Mara could ask what he meant, the asteroid shook violently. Overcome's Wren's voice was frantic. "Captain, they're not trying to shoot us, they're collapsing the belt. Need to move now." Mara grabbed the man's arm, hauling him to his feet. "You're coming with us." Raced back toward the airlock, the man hissed in her ear, "You don't understand. I'm the reason they destroyed Earth's colonies." The words hit her harder than the tremors rocking the asteroid. Outside, the krill ships were closing in, and the rocks around them were beginning to break apart. Mara realized they had just walked straight into the maw of something far bigger and far deadlier than a simple rescue mission. The ambush in the mist, the Resolute drifted into the coordinates like a shadow slipping into deeper darkness. The uncharted sector was not empty, it was wrapped in a strange silver mist. No stars could be seen, only a dim haze that seemed to move on its own, curling around the hole like fingers. Captain Mara Vance stood on the bridge, her jaw tight. Every sensor reading came back scrambled. "Cloak interference?" asked Lieutenant Harrow, scanning the controls. "Not cloak," replied Mara. "This is something else." In the silence, the distress signal flared again, louder now and desperate. "Help me. They're coming." The same human voice. But this time, there was a faint second sound behind it, like heavy metal scraping against stone. Mara felt it in her spine. She turned to Communications Officer Rhea. "Can you trace it?" "But the signal's moving," Rhea said, fingers flying over the controls, like it's being carried. Before Mara could answer, alarms screamed. Harrow's voice was sharp. "Multiple signatures incoming. Krill interceptors. Closing. Fast." The mist suddenly tore apart, revealing sleek insect-like shapes darting through the void, the krill warships. Their hulls shimmered like oil, bending light around them. They'd been hiding in the mist, Mara realized. For us, the krill ships didn't fire immediately. Instead, they formed a wide circle, forcing the Resolute into the center. It was a predator's trap. "Options?" Mara asked, her voice cold but steady. "Fight our way out," Harrow said. "Their formation will cut us down. Or, we find the source of that signal," Rhea suggested, "and hope whoever sent it knows another way out." Mara didn't hesitate. "Lock on to that signal. Helm, take us in." The Resolute shot forward, engines blazing. Krill ships moved instantly, breaking formation and chasing. Bolts of plasma streaked past, shaking the Resolute's shields. The bridge lights flickered. Harrow cursed under his breath, returning fire. One krill interceptor burst into shards of glowing metal, but two more took its place. Rhea shouted over the chaos. "Signal's close. 2 clicks ahead, inside that asteroid cluster." Mara narrowed her eyes. The asteroids spun slowly in the mist, each one covered in strange crystalline growths that reflected the ship's lights like mirrors. The perfect place for an ambush. "Punch us through," Mara ordered. The Resolute weaved between massive rocks as krill fire followed them, lighting up the mist. Shields flared under the strain. The sound of metal groaning filled the bridge. Then they saw it. Hidden between 2 giant asteroids was a small, battered vessel, clearly human, but ancient, its hull scarred and pitted. "That's where—" "The signal's coming from," Rhea confirmed. "Open hailing frequency," Mara said. The voice returned, trembling but alive. "You came, thank God. But you have to move." They had the transmission cut off in a burst of static. A sudden flash lit the mist, more krill ships emerging from the asteroid shadows. They weren't interceptors this time. These were larger, heavy cruisers, bristling with weapons. Harrow's face went pale. They weren't just hunting us. They were protecting that ship. Mara's mind raced. That meant one thing. Whatever was inside that small human vessel, the Krill wanted it badly enough to risk a full fleet ambush. Prepare a boarding team, Mara ordered. We're taking that ship before they do.
Hey.
The crew moved fast, but the Krill cruisers opened fire. The first blast ripped through the starboard side, sending sparks and debris flying across the bridge. The Resolute shook violently, alarms blaring. Hull breach on decks 3 and 4, Harrow reported. Seal it and keep moving, Mara said through gritted teeth. They dove closer to the small ship, shields flickering under constant fire. At the last second, the Resolute latched on with magnetic clamps. Boarding tunnel secure? Rhea shouted. Mara didn't wait. She grabbed her sidearm, signaled the Marines, and entered the tunnel. The inside of the old vessel was dark, cold, and smelled faintly of burnt metal. Her flashlight beam swept over walls covered in strange marks, a mix of human script and something alien. Then, in the shadows, movement. A figure stepped forward, human, thin, pale, and wearing a torn flight suit. His eyes widened when he saw Mara. "You have no idea what you've walked into," he said, voice shaking. "If you're here, it's already too late." Before Mara could answer, the ship shuddered. Not from weapons fire, but from something else. Something massive. Through a crack in the hull, Mara saw it. A colossal shape emerging from the mist. Not a Krill warship, something older, something alive. The Resolute floated just beyond the massive Krill war station. Its dark, jagged spires twisted upward like the bones of some ancient beast. Captain Mara Vance stood on the bridge, her jaw tight. Every sensor reading told her they were surrounded. By enemy ships, cloaked and watching. Beside her, Commander Hale studied the holographic map. "We can't get closer without tripping their perimeter alarms," he said. "If we do, we'll have 50 Krill cruisers on us in seconds." Mara kept her voice calm. "We're not here to fight. We're here to find the source of that signal." Lieutenant Irie, the young communications officer, looked pale. "Captain, the signal is moving. It's inside the station. And it's broadcasting again." The bridge fell silent as the voice came through the speakers. The same desperate human tone they had heard before. "Help me. They know you're here. You have to hurry." The voice cut off, replaced by static. Mara turned sharply to Irie. "Trace it now." The lieutenant's fingers flew across the console. "It's deep inside, but Captain, I'm detecting something else. The signal's being bounced through a Krill military relay." That means Hale finished grimly. "The Krill are letting us hear it." Mara felt the trap closing. The Krill had annihilated human colonies before, were cunning hunters. If this was bait, the Resolute was already in the jaws. But she couldn't shake the thought. What if the voice was real? What if a human really was? Trapped inside? "Prepare infiltration," Mara ordered. "Small team. No heavy weapons. We keep this quiet." Minutes later, Mara, Hale, and 2 Marines descended in a stealth shuttle. The station loomed closer until its metal surface filled the viewport. They slipped into a maintenance bay, bypassing the automated scanners. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Metal corridors stretched out, lit by sickly green lights. Every sound seemed amplified. The clank of boots, the faint hiss of recycled air. Hale whispered, motion sensors picking up, movement ahead. One figure. They rounded a corner, and there he was, a human man, thin and bruised, chained to a bulkhead. His eyes widened in shock as he saw them. "You came," he whispered. Mara stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you?" "My name's Laurent Vale, last survivor of the Elysium colony, the Krill. They've been keeping me alive for you didn't finish." Alarms wailed. The corridor flooded with red light. Mara spun around the Marines, raised their rifles. Dozens of Krill soldiers poured in from both ends, their insectoid armor glinting in the emergency glow. Lauren's face twisted, not in fear, but in something else. "You shouldn't have come," he he said quietly. And then Mara saw it, the faint glow of a tracking implant at the base of his neck. Hale's eyes went wide. "Captain, he's the beacon." The Krill commander stepped forward, its voice like knives scraping on stone. "We knew the last human warship would come for one of its own. And now, the last humans are ours." The Marines opened fire, green plasma bolts lighting the hallway. Mara grabbed Loran by the arm, dragging him toward the shuttle as chaos erupted. The air filled with the stench of burning metal and alien ichor. They ran. Behind them, Hale and the Marines fought to hold the enemy back. The Krill moved like shadows, their clawed feet hammering against the floor. They reached the shuttle, but only 3 made it inside. Mara slammed the hatch shut as the docking bay doors opened to the black void of space. "Launch!" she barked. The shuttle tore free, diving back toward the Resolute. But Mara's mind was racing. Loran was sitting, silently in the corner, his eyes unreadable. Was he truly a prisoner, or part of the trap? The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The last stand, the Krill fleet dropped out of warp like a swarm of shadows blotting out the stars. The Resolute hung in the void, her damaged hull glowing faintly from the heat of recent repairs. Captain Maravant stood on the bridge, watching. As hundreds of enemy ships formed a wall around them, the air was thick with the quiet dread that always comes before a final battle. "Captain Ensign," Lyra said softly, "they've locked weapons on us." Mara didn't answer right away. Her eyes traced the massive flagship of the Krill, its jagged design like a floating fortress. Somewhere inside that monster was the warlord who had burned half of humanity's colonies to ash. And somewhere out here was the reason they had come. The survivor whose voice had called them into this death trap. "Open a channel to all hands," Mara finally said. Her voice carried across every deck. "Crew of the Resolute, we have one shot. One moment to make this worth it. If this is the last fight humanity fights, let it be the one they remember." Around the ship, engineers worked with trembling hands. Gunners loaded the last of the ammunition, and medics secured the wounded in safe compartments. The AI Orion hummed through the comms, its voice calm despite the odds. "Captain, I have a suggestion that may allow one ship to destroy many." Mara raised an eyebrow. On. Orion projected a glowing map in the air. "The Krill fleet is using a shared energy grid for shields. If we overload it with a high-intensity EMP burst, their defenses will collapse for a short time. But to do that, we'd have to be inside their formation," Mara finished. The bridge fell silent. It was suicide. But no one spoke against. At helm, Mara ordered, "Take us in. Maximum burn." The Resolute's engines roared to life and the ship surged forward. Plasma fire lit up the void as Krill ships opened fire. Shields flared under the impact, each hit rattling the frame. The crew gritted their teeth and held their stations. "EMP charge at 80%, Orion announced. A Krill destroyer moved in to block their path. "Forward. Guns. Fire," Mara barked. The Resolute's cannons lit up, tearing into the alien hull until it exploded in a bloom of white fire. They punched through the gap and kept going. "Charge at 95%. Mara's knuckles tightened on the console. "Hold, hold." They broke through the inner perimeter. The flagship loomed ahead, its hull glowing with shield energy. A pulse of blinding light exploded from the Resolute, racing across space like a ripple in water. Krill shields flickered, then died completely. All weapons, fire, every gun on the Resolute unleashed at once. Explosions ripped through enemy ships, chain reactions tearing apart entire clusters. The flagship shuddered under the assault, its weapons falling silent. But the victory came at a cost. Turn fire slammed into the Resolute, tearing through. Armor! Decks went dark. Alarms screamed. The ship was dying. "Mara," Orion said, "the survivor's beacon, it's moving. A small craft is escaping the flagship." Mara's breath caught. "Lock tractor beam. Bring them aboard." Duh. Crew worked fast, even as the ship shook under enemy fire. The small craft docked, and the survivor stepped onto the bridge, a man. Older, scarred, wearing the insignia of Earth's last defense fleet. "I'm Admiral Kale," he said. "And I have a plan to end the Krill War." Mara didn't have time to ask. More enemy ships warped in, blocking their escape route. She looked around at her battered crew. "Orion," she said quietly, "prepare the jump drive, and send the Admiral's plan to every human outpost still alive." The AI paused. "Understood." The Resolute's engines flared, and the ship vanished into the dark, leaving behind a shattered Krill fleet. And the first spark of hope humanity had seen in decades, the war was far from over. But for the first time it felt winnable.